A mysterious dog for a man who was walking in the forest and implores to be followed. When the dog finally arrived at the destination, the man began to cry desperately for what he saw in the place. Imagine, Fernando, an adventurer who loves to explore new places, was walking in the middle of a very distant desert, one of those that never seems to end. He had decided to venture into an area where few people dared to go because he loved feeling that feeling of discovering something new, something that no one else had seen. The sun was hot, the wind was dry, and all around it looked like a movie scene, just sand and more sand. It was then when, suddenly, Albo called his attention. In the middle of nowhere, right there was a dog. And it wasn't just any dog. It was a mower, with shiny fur and a look that seemed to ask for help, but that also hid a secret. Fernando looked around and wondered, what does a dog do so well cared for here? Only in the desert? His heart beat a little faster, that mixture of curiosity and concern. Something in the look of that lost dog seemed to scream that there was a story behind it. Something important that Fernando could not simply ignore. Then, moved by that feeling, he decided to approach. With each step, Fernando felt the wind of the desert on his face and the attentive look of the hunter, as if the dog was waiting for him specifically. It was as if that encounter had not been a coincidence. Fernando was about to discover that this adventure would be much more than a simple walk through the desert. It would be the beginning of something that would change his life forever. When Fernando approached the dog, he noticed something curious. The farmer had a collar with the name Zeus engraved. Now he had a name. Fernando even tried to win Zeus' trust, caressing him and offering him some water. When they felt more comfortable with each other, Fernando thought. Then he opened the car door, waiting for Zeus to jump inside. But, to Fernando's surprise, Zeus shook his head and took a few steps back. He didn't want to get in the car in any way. Instead, he looked directly into Fernando's eyes and began to bark, a firm bark, as if he were trying to say something. It was one of those moments when it seems that animals know exactly what they are doing and what they want you to understand. And suddenly he had a crazy idea. Does he want me to follow him? And then, without thinking twice, Fernando decided to trust the dog. It was a strange feeling, but Fernando felt that Zeus knew exactly what he was doing. He left the car right there and began to follow Zeus on foot, step by step. Zeus walked ahead with a clear purpose, as if he were guiding Fernando to something important. With the sun setting and the light starting to change, Fernando could not help feeling a cold step running over his back. What did Zeus want to show him? Because a dog would be wandering around there, guiding a stranger. Fernando did not know where he was going, but something inside him told him that he had to continue. It was the beginning of a mystery, and he felt that the only way to discover it was to trust Zeus and move on. Everything about the dog was very strange. Fernando looked at Zeus and could not understand. How can a dog be so well cared for? With the clean fur and bright eyes, he had ended up there, in the middle of the desert. He didn't seem mistreated or hungry, and definitely didn't have that sad look of an abandoned animal. It was as if they had put him there on purpose, but who is he? And why? While he walked behind Zeus, Fernando didn't stop thinking about that. Every step he took seemed to raise more questions. Did he get lost? But who would bring a dog to such a remote place? And why it seemed so safe to you from the path that followed? Fernando looked around. The desert spread in all directions and he could not find any clue. Nothing made sense. Sometimes, Zeus stopped, looked at Fernando as if he wanted to say trust me, and kept walking. That made Fernando even more intrigued. He had never seen a dog like that, who seemed to know so much and at the same time hide so much. Each movement of Zeus was calculated, almost as if it had a mission. Fernando began to feel that this encounter was not a coincidence. There was something bigger behind this, and he was about to discover it. The sun was already lower in the horizon. The sky was starting to take orange tones, and the shadows in the desert were getting longer. Fernando felt a mixture of adrenaline and curiosity, a tension in the air that made him believe he was approaching something big, something that would change all that adventure. How could a dog know exactly where to go? What was he trying to show him? These questions hammered in Fernando's mind, increasing the mystery even more with each step they took together. What Fernando didn't know was that, soon, he would understand that Zeus was there for a very special reason. And that path, which now seemed so uncertain, would reveal secrets that he never would have imagined. Before continuing, remember to like and subscribe to the channel if you love animals and their exciting stories. Fernando continued following Zeus for a while, and little by little the desert landscape began to change. The dry and sand-filled soil gave rise to a dense vegetation, until, almost unnoticed, Fernando found himself entering a forest surrounding the desert area. The transition was almost magical, as if he were crossing to another world, a very different place from what he had planned to explore. Forming a green roof that blocked the direct sunlight and created a feeling of freshness that contrasted with the heat of the desert. You didn't even doubt it a bit. He walked forward, with steps decided, turning through small hidden paths, always checking that Fernando was right behind. Fernando was asking himself more and more what was happening. It was as if the forest had secrets hidden, as if he was keeping something he could not yet see. Zeus guided by paths that many times disappeared between the foliage and then opened again, as if the dog knew exactly where to step and how to cross the most difficult points. Fernando stumbled a few times, trying to keep up with the pace, but every time he almost fell, he saw Zeus stop and look at him as if he were waiting for him, as if he could not make that crossing without Fernando. While Fernando was guiding Zeus along those almost invisible paths, something unexpected caught his attention. In a small light, there was a garment on the floor. It was as if the fabric was lying there, half hidden between the leaves and dry branches. Fernando stopped, frowning, and took a few steps forward to observe more closely. Zeus also stopped and looked at him, as if he had waited that moment all the time, as if he knew that Fernando needed to see that. Fernando crouched and picked up the garment. It was a shirt, but not just any shirt. It looked like a good quality garment with a fabric that seemed too expensive to be there, in the middle of the forest. There was something disturbing about all that. The shirt was a bit dirty, with sticky sheets and small stains that Fernando could not identify well. But what worried him the most was the fact that it seemed to have been left there in a hurry, perhaps even desperate. Someone had stripped of that garment in that place. But why? And where was that person now? Fernando didn't understand the reason that shirt was there, but he decided to follow Zeus. After hours following the mysterious path that Zeus seemed to know so well, something began to change in the landscape of the forest, and the dog ended up finding something. There was a hole between the trees that opened towards what seemed to be a cave, half hidden, as if the forest was trying to keep it secret. Fernando slowly approached, moving the sleds aside, and saw a dark entrance in a. The cave's mouth was narrow, but it seemed to expand as it entered. It was like a crack in the forest, a place that clearly few people knew or had the courage to enter. Zeus was there, standing next to Fernando with his eyes fixed on the darkness of the cave, and he let go of a small moan, as if he were encouraging Fernando to move on. Fernando breathed deeply. He felt his heart beat rapidly, and a mixture of fear and curiosity made him doubt. But inside him he told him that this was the place he was supposed to be, that this was the destination of the trip until then. With a flashlight in his backpack, Fernando lit the entrance and began to explore the cave. Something caught his attention. At the bottom of the cave there was a soft, almost imperceptible light, like a dim glow that seemed to emanate from somewhere deeper. It was strange. Who would light a light there? And how could such an isolated cave have some kind of illumination? Fernando's heart beat faster. He knew he needed to see what it was, although the idea of going further to the bottom of the cave was terrifying. It was as if that light was calling him, as if he was waiting for his arrival. Fernando, with the flashlight in hand and his heart beating fast, continued to advance in the cave, guided by the soft light that he saw later. Zeus followed him to his side, firm and attentive, as if he knew exactly what he was doing. The atmosphere became increasingly humid and the air heavier. Every step of Fernando resonated on the stone walls, as if the cave itself whistled back, as if it were alive. The ground was irregular, covered with small stones and slimy moss, which made Fernando have to move slowly, carefully. As he went deeper, The soft glow he had seen from afar became a little stronger, although it was still mysterious. Fernando was unable to see exactly what that light was producing, but it seemed to come from somewhere even deeper in the cave. He began to wonder if it was really safe. After all, nobody knew he was there, and he had no idea what he would find. But there was something that drove him, a feeling that it should continue, that the truth was right in front of him. Suddenly, the narrow path of the cave began to open, revealing a kind of larger chamber. Fernando illuminated the environment with his flashlight and could see the walls expanding, the roof getting higher, like a large natural room inside the mountain. The glow that used to be just a distant point now seemed to partially fill the space, a soft light that emanated from a corner of the cave, almost like an invitation. Zeus advanced first as if he were calm about that light, and Fernando followed him, curious and nervous at the same time. The environment was humid, with small drops of water that slipped through the walls, and the sound of the stars falling resounded softly through space. When Fernando approached the place where the light emanated, he felt a knot in his stomach, a mixture of anxiety and fear. And then, when he finally got close enough, he saw something that left him paralyzed. In a small crack in the cave, wrapped in a dirty old blanket, there was a baby. His small eyes shone when the light of the flashlight shone, and he cried softly, as if he was waiting for someone, as if he were afraid. Fernando was left without reaction for a moment. The scene was so unexpected that he could not believe what he saw. The baby's cry resonated in the cave, and the sound seemed to fill it with a sense of urgency, a deep feeling that he should act quickly. Zeus was next to the baby, looking at Fernando and then the boy, as if he was waiting for him to do something. The dog seemed restless, walking in circles as if he wanted to make sure the baby was safe. Fernando knelt beside the baby, trying to calm him down with his soft voice. He took him carefully, feeling the fragile weight in his arms, and his heart sank when he thought about everything that little creature had happened until being found there, alone in the middle of that cave. Fernando could not understand how someone could have left a baby there, in that isolated and dangerous place. The questions began to bomb his mind. Who had done this? Why was the baby there? Was there someone closer? He looked around the cave, but all he found was darkness and silence, only the dim light illuminating the place and the sound of the cry diminishing as the baby calmed down in his arms. Zeus, on the other hand, seemed relieved to see Fernando holding the baby. It was as if the dog's mission was partially fulfilled. He stopped walking in circles and sat next to Fernando, looking at him with an expression that seemed to say, "Now you understand why I brought you here," thanking the dog in silence for being so persistent. Without him, Fernando would never have found the baby in time. On the other hand, the baby was cold, frozen. Fernando could feel the small and fragile body trembling in his arms as he wrapped it with the blanket he found around him, trying to warm it up. The scene was distressing. That baby shouldn't be there, in the middle of a damp and dark cave, only undefended. Fernando looked around, looking for something that could explain what had happened. And it was then that he saw something on the floor, near the baby. There were some bags, old and dirty, as if someone had tried to leave some supplies, but in a hasty and disorganized way. Next to the bags, a piece of paper caught his attention. A note, somewhat wrinkled, as if it had been left there without much care. Fernando crouched down to pick up the note, while Zeus was standing by his side, attentive to anything that could happen. He unfolded the paper and began to read. The words were garbled, trembling, as if the person who wrote them was desperate. "Forgive me, my son. I have no other option. I hope you can forgive me someday." Fernando's heart shrunk when he read that. That was a farewell note written by the father of the baby. He could not imagine the pain or despair that someone would have to feel to abandon a child in that state. But at the same time, there was something disturbing in those words. Something didn't make sense. Fernando knew he needed help. And quickly, with the baby still in his arms, he took out his cell phone and called the police, trying to explain as best as possible the surreal situation in which he was. The voice on the other side of the line seemed incredible, but comprehensive, and soon Fernando received instructions to stay where he was while a rescue team was heading to the place. After a while, The police arrived and Fernando handed the baby over to the authorities, feeling a mixture of relief and concern. The scene was chaotic, with flashlights lighting up the cave and the police asking quick questions, trying to understand what had happened. Fernando told everything he knew, how he had followed Zeus, how they found the cave, the baby, the note. The police listened carefully while they picked up the bags and the note as evidence. Fernando was informed of something that left him completely shocked. The initial investigation had revealed that the father of the baby had had a psychological episode days before. In his despair, he had gotten involved with a clandestine network of child trafficking. Fernando felt a chill throughout his body when he heard that. The father of the baby had sold his own son, convinced by people without scruples who promised easy money and a better life for the child. It was terrifying to imagine that this fragile and innocent little being had been given the mercy of cruel people who only saw children as merchandise. Fernando's heart was filled with pain and rage. The idea that someone could be capable of such an act was difficult to accept. He thought of the baby in the innocent and frightened eyes he had seen in the cave, and wondered how the father had reached that point. Of course, a psychological episode could explain the despair, but still, sell his own son? Fernando felt that this was the worst kind of betrayal, one that left deep marks, even in someone so small. While the police explained that they were tracking the clandestine and trying to locate the father of the baby, Fernando could not take away from his head the role he had found. The words of farewell, the obvious pain, the feeling of loss, everything seemed so bad, so out of place. At the same time, there was something tragic in all that. Perhaps the father really believed that he was doing the right thing, that was the only way out. And the most surprising thing in this whole story, Zeus, the dog that led Fernando to the cave and saved the baby, belonged to the father of the child himself. The police, in the middle of the investigation, began to unite the pieces of the puzzle, and the details that emerged were at the same time sad and heroic. One of the witnesses, a lady who lived near the baby's father, told her she had seen the man the day before the incident. She remembered him well because her behavior seemed strange to her. She had bought supplies, some bags, food and water, and was accompanied by Zeus. She clearly remembered seeing him tell the neighbors that she was going to take a walk with the dog. I thought it was just a normal walk. He always liked to go out with Zeus, the witness told her. But then, when I saw him come back, he was without a shirt and seemed agitated. And the dog was not with him. Seemed very strange to me. That information brought a new layer to the mystery. The police then confronted the father of the baby, who was already under custody. The man, in a confused mental state, ended up revealing the missing part, and it was a story that touched the heart. Zeus, in reality, had tried to prevent his owner from committing that terrible act. In his statement, the father told him that after leaving the baby in the cave, he tried to leave. However, Zeus, the fiend-taker who had always been by his side, seemed to understand that something was wrong. He began to bark, to pull the man through the pants, trying desperately to prevent him from leaving the baby, when the barking and attempts to draw attention did not work. Zeus did something that surprised the child's father. He began to grumble. He stood in front of the man, blocking the way as if saying, "No, I won't let you do this." The father, in an altered emotional state, tried to separate the dog, but Zeus didn't give up. He continued trying to push the man back, biting the edge of his shirt, pulling hard. It was during that desperate fight that the shirt ended up torn, and Zeus was hurt in his attempt to make his owner understand that he could not simply leave. The loyalty of the dog, his determination to protect the baby. He took him to fight against the only person who had been loyal all his life. After the fight, the man managed to get away, leaving Zeus behind. He returned to the city without the dog, without a shirt, leaving behind not only his son, but also the faithful friend who did not agree with his actions. Zeus, on the other hand, did not give up. Even after being abandoned, he continued the mission that he knew was the right one. He returned to the cave, found the baby, and did the only thing he could do: wait until he found someone to help him save the child. When Fernando heard that part of the story, he felt a knot in his heart. That dog, who had fought against his own owner for something he believed in, was more than just an animal. Zeus was a hero, someone who, even without words, had risen against what he knew was unfair. Zeus' image, only in the cave, protecting the baby while he was waiting for help. He looked at Zeus, who was now by his side, as always, with his eyes and tail moving. There was no anger in the dog. There was no resentment. It was pure loyalty and love. And Fernando knew that without him, that baby would not have had any opportunity. Zeus had risked everything, even security, along with his owner, to do the right thing. The police now had all the pieces of the puzzle. Zeus, the improbable hero, had been a fundamental piece not only to find the baby, but also to unravel the whole story and expose the clandestine network that had manipulated a desperate man. Fernando knew that Zeus had to be recognized for what he did, not only as a loyal dog, but as the true savior of that child. Zeus' unconditional love, his courage when facing his own owner and his determination not to abandon the baby, showed that he was not just a dog. He was the guardian of that little being who needed him so much. Thank you very much for watching the video until the end. Remember to leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with your opinion about this story.